The man who asks the question has already lost. You just don't know it yet. For decades, you've been taught that curiosity is a virtue, that showing genuine interest is the path to connection. Churches preach it, self-help gurus sell it, dating coaches package it into seminars. And with each piece of advice, you've grown more desperate, more invisible, more irrelevant. You ask better questions. You listen more carefully. You memorize the details of her life like you're studying for an exam you can't afford to fail. And yet somehow, she still leaves. She still chooses the man who barely looked at her. The cruelest part, you never understood why. Niccolo Machiavelli died 500 years ago, but his words echo in the silence between two people who are running out of things to say. He wrote about power, about the invisible forces that move thrones and topple kingdoms. But power isn't confined to castles and courtrooms. It lives in every interaction, every glance, every moment, where one person has something the other desperately needs. And if you're asking questions, you've already revealed what you need. Here's what most men refuse to see. Every question is a confession. It screams, I don't have enough, I'm not enough, I need you to complete me. I depend on your answers to stay relevant in this moment. The moment you open your mouth to ask where she works, what she does on weekends, how her day was, you've handed her the power. You've positioned yourself as the empty vessel waiting to be filled. And women feel this, not rationally, not through careful analysis. They feel it the way a predator feels fear in prey. It's instinctual, primal. The man with power doesn't interrogate. He observes. He doesn't extract information. He inspires revelation. He understands that the true architecture of attraction isn't built on the foundation of your questions, but on the magnetic force of your presence. Machiavelli knew this. He watched princes beg for information from their enemies while remaining ignorant of what those enemies truly wanted. He watched leaders question every decision while the strongest simply decided and others followed. The pattern was always the same. Those who needed answers remained subordinate. Those who already seemed to know ruled. This isn't about manipulation. This isn't about playing games or treating human connection like a strategic campaign. This is about understanding something far deeper. That desperation repels while mystery attracts. That neediness destroys intimacy while self-sufficiency builds it. That the man who has nothing to prove is infinitely more powerful than the man constantly seeking approval through conversation. If you're listening to this right now, and something inside you recognizes this truth, if you felt that gut-level awareness that you've been approaching this all wrong, then you need to subscribe to this channel. Because what you're about to hear will fundamentally shift how you move through the world. This isn't another dating podcast. This isn't another collection of techniques and tricks. This is a recalibration of your entire approach to presence, power, and attraction. Before we go deeper, I want to know, where are you hearing this? Are you driving, at the gym, late at night, alone, finally asking yourself the questions you've been avoiding? Tell me, because every person who finds this carries a different story, and I want to know yours. For now, understand this. The journey from desperation to presence begins with a single shift in perspective. Stop asking, start observing, stop seeking completion from others. Start becoming so genuinely interesting that others naturally want to reveal themselves to you. This is where the transformation begins, not with new techniques, not with better conversation starters, but with understanding why everything you've been doing has been working against you. Machiavelli would recognize you. He'd see a man full of potential, trapped by the wrong beliefs. And if you're ready to escape that trap, to become the man who doesn't need to ask because he already knows how to see, then you're ready for what comes next. The question is no longer, what should you ask? The question is, who do you need to become? You live in an age of unprecedented information. You can know anything about anyone in seconds. Her Instagram history, her LinkedIn profile, her Spotify playlists, her Reddit comments from 3 years ago. Yet, despite having access to more data about people than any generation in history, men have never felt more powerless in genuine human connection. This is the paradox of modern life. We mistake information for understanding. We confuse data with intimacy. A man can scroll through 50 photos of a woman's life and feel like he knows her, when in reality he's just collected surveillance. And when they finally meet, He tries to weaponize this information, asking questions he already knows the answers to, performing curiosity he doesn't genuinely feel. She senses the dishonesty immediately. She feels like she's being interrogated, not seen. The problem you're facing isn't lack of knowledge, it's lack of presence. Every dating app has reduced human connection to a Q&A format. What are you looking for? What's your ideal weekend? What's your biggest fear? Thousands of men asking identical questions, expecting different results. The apps profit from this desperation. They've gamified connection into a points-based system where more messages, more matches, more data gathering somehow equals more intimacy. It doesn't. It creates the opposite. A woman receives 50 messages, most of them starting with the same predictable questions. To her, you become a blur, interchangeable, anonymous. She's not looking for another interviewer asking her to fill in the blanks of his emptiness. In your professional life, the same disease spreads. You're taught in every leadership course that asking good questions is the mark of an effective manager. So you ask, you gather feedback, you solicit opinions, and somehow the people working under you respect you less, not more. They sense that you're uncertain, that you need their input to make decisions. The strongest leaders in any organization are those who make decisions decisively, who create clarity through their own vision, who inspire others to align with something greater than their individual preferences. Romantic relationships follow the same rule. The man who constantly asks, "What do you want? Are you happy? What are you thinking?" is the man who loses her respect. Not because he cares, but because his constant questioning reveals that he doesn't trust his own judgment. He doesn't believe he has the capacity to lead. He's outsourcing his power to her, and attraction cannot survive in that dynamic. Here's what Machiavelli understood that modern self-help culture refuses to acknowledge. Power is not about domination, it's about perception. It's about the invisible architecture of how people relate to each other. The prince doesn't need to ask his citizens what they want. The prince creates conditions where citizens want to serve him, not out of fear or manipulation, but because he radiates a clarity and certainty that people are naturally drawn toward. In the context of human interaction, this translates into something deceptively simple. The man who already seems to understand doesn't need to ask. He observes, he reads, he synthesizes. And because he's not sitting across from you with uncertainty in his eyes, begging you to complete him with your answers, he becomes magnetic. Think about the most memorable people you've known, the ones you think about years later, the ones who changed how you see yourself. Did they interrogate you? Did they ask you a series of well-crafted questions and carefully take notes on your responses? Or did they make an observation that cut straight to something true about you, something you hadn't articulated but recognized immediately as real? You're someone who says yes to everything because you're afraid of disappointing people. That's not a question. It's an observation. And it's infinitely more powerful than what do you find most challenging in relationships. The first one makes her think about herself differently. The second one is just another data point she's been asked 1,000 times before. Machiavelli wrote about virtù, the quality of shaping circumstances to your advantage through skill and perception rather than force. This isn't cynical or manipulative. Here it's the recognition that everything in human interaction communicates something. Your words communicate, your silence communicates, your body language communicates, the way you listen or don't listen communicates. Most men are screaming into the void, sending desperate signals, hoping someone will answer back. They're so focused on the output of their questions that they miss the power of their presence. The central philosophical insight you need to grasp is this. In any human interaction, there is an implicit battle for psychological reality. Whoever sets the frame, whoever determines what's relevant to discuss, whoever maintains composure while the other person scrambles, that person holds the power. Questions are a form of ceding that power. Observations are a form of claiming it. This is why the shift from asking to observing feels so uncomfortable at first. You've been taught your entire life that questions are good, that curiosity is virtuous, that showing interest means asking. But you've never been taught the price of that approach: invisibility, irrelevance, and the slow erosion of attraction. The men who change this pattern are the ones who decide to stop seeking and start seeing. They accept that real power comes not from consuming information, but from radiating presence. Not from needing answers, but from offering clarity. Not from collecting data about other people, but from becoming someone worth paying attention to. This is where your transformation begins, not with new questions to ask, but with the decision to stop asking altogether. Let me show you how this plays out in the real world. Because understanding the principle intellectually is one thing, seeing it in action is completely different. Picture a coffee shop. 2 men, same woman. The scene repeats itself thousands of times every day, but most people never see the pattern beneath it. The first man sits down across from her. He's nervous, not visibly, but it's there in the energy. He's already prepared questions, mental notes. He's done his research. He knows this matters. So within the first minute, he starts. So tell me about yourself. What do you do for work? How long have you been in that field? What made you interested in that? He's building a profile. Each answer feeds the next question. He's genuinely interested. His intentions are pure. But he's also performing interest. Because a man with genuine internal abundance doesn't need to extract information to maintain a conversation. He doesn't need her to complete his sentences. She answers his questions, she's polite, but something in her energy is closed. She's responding, not revealing. She's giving him the surface-level version of her life, the resume version, the part she tells strangers. Because she senses, correctly, that he's collecting data, not connecting. By the end of the coffee, he'll have facts about her. By the end of the coffee, she'll have forgotten his face. Now the second man sits down with her. He doesn't have a list of questions prepared. He's not nervous because he's not trying to achieve anything. He's simply present. He watches. He notices that when she talks about her job, her shoulders tense slightly. He notices that she plays with her coffee cup when she's thinking. He notices that she laughs at something, but her eyes don't change. It's a social laugh, not a real one. 15 minutes into the conversation, he says something that isn't a question. You have the look of someone who's very good at appearing fine while carrying something heavy. She stops. For a moment, there's nothing but silence. Then her eyes change. She's been seen, not interrogated, not analyzed, seen. And because she's been truly seen by someone, something shifts in her. The walls come down slightly. She doesn't answer with a resume answer. She answers with truth. How did you know that? And here's the crucial part. She's now asking him questions. The dynamic has inverted. He didn't need to extract information from her because his observation activated her curiosity about him. Now she wants to know how he perceives things so clearly. Now she's invested in understanding him rather than being understood by him. This is the fundamental reversal that changes everything. The first man leaves that coffee thinking he learned about her. He knows her job title, her hobbies, her family situation. He's collected data. The second man leaves that coffee knowing something far more valuable. He knows how she operates. He knows what she values. He knows what she's protecting. And more importantly, she's wondering about him. This pattern repeats in every domain of life. In business, the executive who asks employees what they think is perceived as weak and uncertain. The executive who listens carefully, observes patterns, and then articulates a clear vision is perceived as wise and strong. In friendships, the person who's always asking about others' problems is often the one who gets drained and abandoned. The person who occasionally offers a sharp, accurate observation about human nature becomes the one people want to be around. The difference isn't in the amount of talking, it's in the quality of presence. Most men have been trained to be conversationalists when they should be trained to be observers. A conversationalist fills space. An observer creates meaning. A conversationalist needs the other person to keep talking so he feels like the interaction is working. An observer can sit in silence because the silence itself communicates something: confidence, presence, comfort with oneself. Here's what Machiavelli knew that the modern dating advice industry refuses to admit. People are fundamentally attracted to those who don't need them. Not those who are cold or distant, but those who are genuinely complete within themselves. The man who sits down with you and immediately needs you to fill his silences is the man everyone eventually abandons. The man who can sit in silence, fully present, comfortable in his own skin, is the man people want to keep around. And the reason is primal. Evolutionarily, we're attracted to those who have what we need. If you're constantly asking, constantly seeking, constantly needing information to feel secure in an interaction, you're broadcasting that you don't have what you need. You're signaling weakness. She hears this and instinctively moves away from you, because on some level, she knows you'll need her more than you can provide for her. But when you sit with her without needing anything from her, no answers, no validation, no completion, something reverses. Now you're the one with something she can't quite define. Now you're the one who has presence. And she'll do extraordinary things to keep that presence around. This isn't cruelty. This isn't manipulation. This is understanding human psychology at the level where it actually operates. Not at the level of conscious intention, but at the level of instinct and survival. The question you need to ask yourself is simple. Which man are you going to be? The one who sits down prepared with questions, seeking answers, needing her to complete him, or the one who sits down already complete, observing clearly, radiating presence? Your entire future in romance, in business, in social dynamics hinges on that choice. You're making a fundamental error, and it's costing you everything. The mistake isn't that you're trying too hard. It's not that you're not trying hard enough. It's something far more insidious. You've internalized a lie so completely that it feels like truth. You believe that genuine interest means interrogation. You believe that caring about someone means extracting their story. You believe that connection requires you to know everything about them. So you ask, and ask, and ask. And with each question, you're unknowingly confessing something to her that destroys attraction at its root. You're saying, I don't have enough internal richness to create this conversation myself. I need you to provide the material. I need you to fill the spaces I can't fill. I need your substance because I lack my own. This is the central conflict, not between you and her, but between the man you think you should be and the man you actually are when you're desperate for her to complete you. Let me be specific about what you're doing wrong, because vagueness won't help you. It's too comfortable, too easy to ignore. First, you're asking obvious questions. How was your day? What do you like to do for fun? Tell me about your family. These aren't questions. They're templates. They're the conversational equivalent of copy-paste. Every man asks these. You're not standing out by asking better versions of the same questions. You're just revealing that you're following the same tired script as everyone else. She's answered these questions 1,000 times. Your execution might be slightly smoother, but you're still playing the same game everyone plays. And she's bored before you've even started. Second, you're using questions as a crutch to avoid being vulnerable yourself. There's a psychological safety in asking. If she's talking, you're not exposed. If she's answering, you don't have to reveal anything about yourself. You can hide behind the pretense of curiosity. But here's what happens. She never gets to know you. She gets to know your questions. And a woman cannot be attracted to your questions. She can only be attracted to you. The real you. The one you're terrified to show. Third, you're not listening to what she's actually saying. You're listening for information you can use. You're listening for ammunition for the next question. You're listening from a place of scarcity, trying to gather enough data to make yourself relevant. Real listening, the kind that creates intimacy, requires you to listen from a place of abundance. To listen because you're genuinely curious about the depths of her experience, not because you need her to validate your worth or prove your interest. Fourth, and this is the most damaging, you're treating questions as a substitute for presence. You think that asking the right questions at the right time will create connection. It won't. Connection is created by presence, by the quality of attention you bring to the moment, by whether you're actually there with her or whether you're mentally rehearsing what to say next, evaluating her responses, planning your strategy. She can feel whether you're present or performing. And when you're performing, which you always are when you're following a script of questions, she closes off. The conflict you're in is this. You've been taught that questions are the path to intimacy, but questions are actually the path to irrelevance. You've been taught that gathering information about someone creates connection, but it creates distance. You've been taught that showing interest means asking, but it means something far different. This is the fundamental misunderstanding that poisons modern male-female dynamics. Men are trying to connect by doing the one thing that guarantees disconnection. They're trying to create intimacy through interrogation. They're trying to build attraction through neediness disguised as interest. Machiavelli would recognize this immediately as a strategic failure. A man who needs something has already lost the negotiation. A man who asks for what he needs reveals his weakness. The prince who needs intelligence from his enemies sends spies. He doesn't sit down and interview them directly. He observes, he reads, he synthesizes. He maintains the upper hand through information asymmetry. He knows things about you without you knowing he knows them. But you're not trying to be a prince in this interaction, are you? You're trying to be likable. You're trying to be the good guy, the interested one, the one who cares. And in your attempt to be good, you're being weak. And weakness isn't attractive. It's pitiful. Here's the hard truth about the conflict you're creating. Every time you ask a question, instead of making an observation, you're choosing safety over power. You're choosing the comfort of the script over the risk of authenticity. You're choosing to remain unknown because being known requires vulnerability, and vulnerability requires courage you don't think you have. But she doesn't want safety. She wants someone who knows who they are and isn't afraid to show it. She wants someone who doesn't need her approval to exist. She wants someone who observes clearly and speaks truthfully, not someone who hides behind questions and politeness. The conflict is internal. It's between who you've been conditioned to be and who you need to become to create real attraction. Most men never resolve this conflict. They keep asking questions, keep wondering why it doesn't work, keep blaming the women for not appreciating their interest. The ones who change, the ones who actually experience real connection, are the ones who realize that questions are a prison, that asking is a form of surrender, that observation is a form of power, that presence is the only thing that matters. You're in that conflict right now. You know the old way isn't working, but you haven't committed to the new way yet. You're still hedging your bets, still preparing backup questions in case the silence gets too uncomfortable. And that hedging is what keeps you stuck. A Stoic would tell you something most men never want to hear. Marcus Aurelius wouldn't comfort you. Seneca wouldn't validate your struggle. They would simply point to the truth and let you decide whether you're strong enough to accept it. Here's what they'd say. You're suffering because you've made your peace dependent on her response. You've anchored your worth to her validation. Every question you ask, every answer you desperately hope for, it's all an attempt to control an outcome you cannot control. And in that attempt, you've lost yourself. The Stoic perspective cuts through all the dating advice nonsense and reveals the actual problem. It's not about technique. It's not about saying the right things or avoiding the wrong ones. It's about your relationship to the outcome itself. You're anxious because you're attached to a specific result. You're needy because you believe her approval defines your value. You're asking questions because you're terrified of silence, of rejection, of irrelevance. But a truly centered man, a man operating from Stoic principles, doesn't need her approval because his value isn't dependent on external validation. He's not asking questions because he's already secure in who he is. His worth isn't on trial in that conversation, so he can afford to observe. He can afford to be silent. He can afford to speak truths instead of asking for reassurance. This is what the ancient philosophers understood that modern psychology completely misses. The solution isn't better communication skills, it's better internal philosophy. It's not about learning what to say, it's about becoming someone who doesn't need the conversation to validate his existence. An existentialist would add another layer. They'd say that you're in bad faith. You're pretending to be someone you're not. You're following scripts. You're performing interest instead of genuinely being interested. You're hiding behind questions instead of making authentic choices. And in that hiding, you're denying your own freedom and responsibility. Existence precedes essence. You're not born with a nature that says, you must ask questions to be a good man. You choose who you are in each moment. And in each moment, you're choosing to be the man who needs, the man who depends, the man who hides. But you could choose differently. You could choose to be present, you could choose to observe, you could choose to speak truth instead of asking for permission. This choice is terrifying because it requires you to accept full responsibility for yourself. You can't blame her for not understanding you if you're not being understood because you're not being authentic. You can't blame the system if you're the one choosing to follow the script. You can't blame dating culture if you're the one choosing neediness over presence. The existentialists would tell you that bad faith is comfortable. Hiding behind questions is easier than standing in your own power. Following the script is safer than creating your own path. But comfort and safety are the prices you pay for a life of irrelevance. Here's what both philosophies agree on. The correction isn't external. It's internal. You don't need to learn better questions. You need to become a different kind of man. A man who's already complete. A man who observes because he's genuinely curious, not because he needs answers. A man who can sit in silence because he's not afraid of it. A man who speaks observations because he sees clearly, not because he's trying to impress. This requires a fundamental shift in how you relate to yourself and to the world. You have to stop seeing approval as something you earn and start seeing it as something that naturally follows when you're genuinely present. You have to stop treating every interaction as a test you might fail and start treating it as an opportunity to be authentically yourself. The Stoic would call this ataraxia, a state of tranquility that comes from accepting what you can and cannot control. You cannot control her response. You cannot control whether she's interested. You cannot control her feelings or her choices, but you can control your presence. You can control your authenticity. You can control whether you hide or stand in your power. The existentialist would call this authenticity, the courage to choose yourself, to be fully responsible for your choices, to stop blaming circumstances and start owning your freedom. Both are describing the same thing, a man who no longer needs the interaction to validate him. And that man, that truly centered man, is infinitely more attractive than any script could ever make him. Because he's not trying to be attractive, he's just being himself. And that, paradoxically, is the most magnetic thing a human being can be. Look around. The modern world is built on a foundation of desperation dressed up as engagement. Every social media platform is architected on questions, prompts asking you to share, algorithms demanding you reveal more. What's on your mind? Tell us your story. Share your thoughts. The entire digital ecosystem is designed to extract data from you while making you feel like you're connecting. And billions of people have accepted this extraction as intimacy. On dating apps, it's worse. The entire structure is one long interrogation, profile questions, match notifications, opening messages that are barely concealed questions. Men mass-producing the same prompts, hoping for different responses. The platform makes money from your desperation, from your constant asking, from the illusion that if you just ask the right question to the right person at the right time, connection will happen. It won't. Connection never happened on a dating app because the medium itself is antithetical to presence. But here's what's fascinating. The men who actually succeed on these platforms aren't following the system. They're defying it. They're the ones who don't play the question game. They match with someone, and instead of asking, "Hey, how's your week going?" they make an observation. They don't ask where she's from. They comment on something in her photos that reveals they actually looked. They're not trying to gather data. They're trying to demonstrate presence across a digital medium that's designed to prevent it. In romantic relationships, the ones in real life, the same pattern repeats. A couple gets together, and within months, they've settled into routines of asking, "How was work? What do you want for dinner? Are you okay?" These aren't questions born from curiosity. They're fillers. They're the conversational equivalent of scrolling. And relationships die in that space, not because the couple doesn't care, but because neither person is truly seeing the other anymore. They're going through the motions, they're asking questions instead of observing changes. They're interrogating instead of connecting. The man who transforms his relationship is the one who stops asking and starts noticing. He sees that she's withdrawn lately, not because she told him in response to his question, but because he actually watched her. He observes that she moves differently when she's stressed. He notices that her laughter has an edge lately, and instead of asking what's wrong, he sits with her and says something like, "Something's changed in you. I don't know what it is. but I feel it. And I'm here. That observation creates more intimacy than 1,000 questions ever could. In your career, the same principle applies. The ambitious man thinks he needs to ask his boss for opportunities. He needs to ask for raises. He needs to ask for recognition. But the man who actually gets ahead is the one who doesn't ask. He demonstrates. He observes what the organization actually needs, not what it says it needs. He sees the gap between stated goals and actual priorities. And he fills that gap without asking permission. He doesn't ask if he can take on more responsibility. He takes it. And then his boss has to ask him, "How are you managing all this?" The dynamic inverts. And with that inversion comes power and advancement. In your finances, this principle is brutal and honest. The desperate man asks for deals. Can you give me a discount? Is there a sale? He's constantly seeking. The man with actual wealth, not necessarily money, but the mindset of abundance, doesn't ask. He observes market inefficiencies. He sees value where others see cost. He makes moves that don't require validation from anyone else. And as a result, he accumulates more while appearing to ask for less. On social media, everyone's dying for engagement. They're asking questions in their posts. What do you think? Let me know in the comments. Would you? They're begging for interaction because they've internalized the belief that their worth is measured by engagement metrics. The accounts that actually gain genuine followings aren't asking. They're not performing curiosity. They're making observations. They're offering perspectives. They're creating something so interesting that people are naturally drawn to engage. The difference is subtle but profound. In burnout, that modern epidemic where men are working themselves to death, the core issue is often this. They're constantly asking for permission to rest. They're asking if it's okay to take time off. They're asking if they're doing enough. They're seeking validation for their exhaustion. But a man with actual presence doesn't ask. He observes his own state. He sees clearly when he's approaching collapse. And he makes the decision to rest, not because someone gave him permission, but because he's present enough to listen to his own body and mind. He doesn't need external validation to prioritize his health. The pattern is everywhere once you start seeing it. Modern life rewards asking. Platforms reward it. Capitalism rewards it. Social structures reward it. But real power, the kind that actually creates change, that builds genuine relationships, that sustains success, comes from observation, from presence, from being so genuinely centered that you don't need others to complete your reality. You're drowning in a world of questions because everyone around you is drowning in desperation. The question is whether you'll continue drowning or whether you'll climb out and start observing from higher ground. The transformation happens in the small moments, not in grand gestures or life-altering decisions, but in the daily choices you make about how you show up in the world. Start with money. The man obsessed with status is constantly asking questions. Am I making enough? Do they think I'm successful? Will this impress her? He's dependent on external validation for his sense of worth. His financial decisions are made from a place of seeking approval. He buys things to signal status because he needs others to confirm his value. But a man who's genuinely centered doesn't ask these questions. He observes. He sees what he actually needs versus what he's been told he should want. He makes financial decisions from a place of clarity, not desperation. And paradoxically, this man accumulates more wealth because his decisions aren't emotionally reactive. In relationships, the shift is even more pronounced. The anxious man is constantly asking, does she still like me? Am I doing enough? What does she want? He's performing a version of himself, hoping it matches what she needs. But the man who observes simply watches. He sees when she's pulling away and he doesn't panic. He sees when she's testing him and he doesn't apologize. He's present enough to read the actual dynamics happening instead of being lost in his own anxiety. And that presence, that refusal to be needy, is what keeps attraction alive. Status is the modern religion. Men are obsessed with their position in the social hierarchy, so they ask constantly. They ask for validation on social media. They ask through their choices. Will this car make people respect me? Will this house prove I'm successful? But a man operating from observation sees the game clearly. He understands that perceived status is just smoke. Real status, the kind that actually matters, comes from being genuinely interesting, from having developed a real interior life, from being so authentically centered that you don't need props to prove your worth. The man who doesn't seek status is the one people actually respect. On social media, the desperation is visible if you know how to look. Every post is a question disguised as a statement. Isn't this beautiful? With a photo of a sunset. Don't I look good? With a gym selfie. Doesn't my life look amazing? With a vacation picture. People are constantly asking for validation, for likes, for comments. They're broadcasting their need. But the accounts that actually attract genuine followers aren't asking. They're observing their own experience and sharing it authentically. They're not performing for approval. They're simply showing up. And that authenticity is magnetic. Burnout deserves special attention because it's where this principle becomes life or death important. A burned-out man is constantly asking, am I good enough? Should I keep pushing? What more can I give? He's operating from a place of desperate seeking. He's trying to prove his worth through exhaustion. He's asking permission from others to rest when he should be observing his own state clearly. The moment you start observing instead of asking, everything changes. You notice the signs of collapse before they happen. You see clearly when you're being exploited. You make decisions from a place of self-respect, not desperation. And ironically, the man who takes care of himself is often more successful than the man destroying himself trying to prove something. The hardest application is this. You have to stop asking yourself the wrong questions. Am I good enough? Stop. Observe whether you're developing as a person. Does she like me? Stop. Observe whether you're being present and authentic. Will I succeed? Stop. Observe whether you're making good decisions and taking aligned action. The shift from asking to observing is internal before it's external. Here's what changes when you make this shift. You stop performing and start being. You stop seeking validation and start building something real. You stop bleeding energy into questions that don't matter and start investing in presence that does. Your relationships become deeper. Your career advances faster. Your financial decisions improve. Your sense of self stabilizes. Not because you suddenly became more impressive, but because you stopped needing to be impressive. You became genuinely interesting instead. This is the practical application of everything we've discussed. It's not theory. It's not philosophy for its own sake. It's a way of being that fundamentally changes your experience of being human. You stop living as a question mark seeking answers. You start living as a period, complete, whole, present. And from that completeness, everything else follows. This is where most people stop reading or stop listening, because what comes next isn't motivational, it isn't comforting, it's brutal. These are the hard truths that nobody wants to say, but everyone needs to hear. Every question you ask is a confession of incompleteness. When you ask, what do you think? You're broadcasting that your own thoughts aren't enough. When you ask, do you like me? You're announcing that your own worth is uncertain. The man who knows himself doesn't need external validation to confirm his reality. He observes, concludes, and moves forward. Your questions aren't signs of intelligence or interest. They're signs of dependence. Silence terrifies you because you're terrified of yourself. The real reason you fill conversational pauses with questions isn't that you're curious. It's that you can't stand the sound of your own thoughts. You're running from something internal, and you're using other people as escape routes. When you finally get comfortable with silence, you'll discover something shocking. You're actually interesting when you stop trying to be. She's not attracted to your questions. She's repelled by your neediness. Attraction doesn't work the way you've been taught. It's not a rational calculation where she tallies up your good qualities and decides you're worth her time. Attraction is primal. It's based on whether you radiate self-sufficiency or desperation. Every time you ask for her validation, her approval, her answers, you're triggering a primal alarm in her that says, this man is weak, and weakness isn't attractive, it's pathetic. The people you actually remember, the ones who changed your life, rarely asked you questions. Think about the teachers who actually influenced you, the mentors who shaped how you see the world, the friends you still think about years later. Did they interrogate you? Or did they observe you so clearly that they saw things about yourself you hadn't seen? They made you question yourself, not the other way around. They didn't need your information. They offered you clarity. That's the difference between forgettable and unforgettable. You've been pursuing the wrong thing your entire life. You've been chasing connection, trying to build intimacy, attempting to create relationships through the accumulation of shared information. But real connection doesn't come from knowing everything about each other. It comes from being genuinely present with each other, from seeing clearly, from speaking truth instead of asking for reassurance. You've been building with the wrong materials. No wonder nothing sticks. Fear is driving every question you ask. Fear that you're not enough. Fear that she'll leave. Fear that you'll say something wrong. Fear of silence. Fear of being truly seen. Fear of rejection. Every single question is a small act of cowardice. It's you trying to control an outcome because you're terrified of the one you can't control. And she feels this fear. It radiates from you, and it repels her. These truths are uncomfortable because they require you to look at yourself honestly, to see that the problem isn't her. It's not the dating market. It's not bad luck. It's you. You're the one who's been approaching this wrong. You're the one who's been asking instead of observing. You're the one who's been seeking instead of standing in your own power. The good news? If the problem is you, then the solution is also you. You can change. You can stop asking. You can start observing. You can become someone so genuinely interesting that others naturally want to reveal themselves to you, but only if you're willing to accept these truths first. You stand at a crossroads now, not metaphorically, literally, because after hearing all of this, you're faced with a choice that will define the rest of your life. One path is familiar. It's the one you've been walking. You'll leave this moment, and within days, maybe hours, you'll be back to asking questions. You'll convince yourself that this approach is just one tool in your toolkit, that you can combine it with the old strategies. You'll tell yourself you understand the message, but you're not extreme about it. You'll be moderate. You'll ask sometimes, observe sometimes, and in that moderation, in that compromise, you'll remain exactly where you are, invisible, searching, needy. By the end of next year, you won't remember this message. By the end of the next conversation that matters, you'll have reverted completely. The other path is harder. It requires something most men aren't willing to give: commitment to actual change. Not surface-level change, not new conversation techniques, real change. The kind that requires you to become a genuinely different person. The kind that means spending time alone, developing an actual interior life. Reading, thinking, reflecting, building real achievements, not just collecting experiences to tell stories about. Getting comfortable with solitude so that you don't need others to complete you. Developing genuine interests so that you have something real to offer, besides your need for her to complete you. This path is unpopular because it doesn't offer quick fixes. There's no hack, no technique, no secret that you can apply tomorrow and see instant results. It's slow, it's boring, it's unglamorous. It requires you to actually become someone worth being around instead of just learning to fake it better. But here's what happens if you choose this path. After months of genuine development, something shifts. You stop noticing whether women are interested in you because you're actually interested in being present. You find yourself making observations instead of asking questions, not because you're trying to, but because you're actually seeing people clearly now. Conversations become natural instead of scripted. Connections happen without effort because you're not trying to force them. Attraction follows naturally because you've become genuinely attractive, not in the superficial sense, but in the deep sense. You're compelling, interesting, magnetic. And that's when you realize the real secret. The point was never to get her. The point was always to become the kind of man who doesn't need to ask because he's already complete. Everything else, the relationships, the success, the respect, that all follows naturally from that foundation. The final lesson is simple, and it's the only one that actually matters. Stop trying to become more interesting and start becoming more present. Stop gathering data about people and start genuinely seeing them. Stop asking questions and start making observations. Stop seeking validation and start building a life so rich and so authentic that others naturally want to be part of it. The transformation you're looking for isn't external. It's not about what you say or do. It's about who you become. And the only person who can do that work is you. Everything else is just noise. Before you go back into the world, before you return to your habitual patterns, ask yourself these questions, not because I'm asking them for you, but because you need to ask them of yourself. First question: if no one was watching, if there were absolutely no consequences, no judgment, no repercussions, would you still be asking these questions? Or would you finally stop and just observe? This reveals something critical about your motivations. Most of what you do for an audience that may not even exist. You're performing for people who don't care. You're seeking validation from people who are too focused on their own lives to notice you. But if you strip away the audience, if you remove the need for approval, what remains? Who are you when nobody's watching? That's the person you need to become. Not for her, for yourself. Second question: what would it mean to actually accept that you're already complete? Not perfect, not flawless, not the best version of yourself yet, but complete enough that your worth isn't dependent on her response. What would change if you stopped waiting for external validation to feel okay about yourself? How would you move through conversations differently? How would you make decisions differently? What would you stop apologizing for? What would you finally start doing? The answer to this question is your actual roadmap. It's not about self-help or motivation. It's about whether you're brave enough to trust yourself. Third question: who are you becoming with every question you ask, and who would you become if you stopped? Every habit shapes you. Every time you ask instead of observe, you're reinforcing the neural pathway of neediness. Every time you seek validation instead of trusting your own judgment, you're training yourself to be dependent. But the inverse is also true. Every time you observe instead of ask, you're training yourself to be perceptive. Every time you trust your own judgment, you're training yourself to be strong. You're not just changing your behavior. You're literally rewiring who you are at a neurological level. So the question isn't just, should I stop asking? The question is, who do I want to become? Because that answer determines everything. Sit with these questions. Don't rush to answer them. Don't retreat into your habitual thinking patterns. Stay present with the discomfort. Because the discomfort is where real growth happens. You've heard everything now. All the principles, all the applications, all the hard truths. Now comes the moment where you have to decide what you actually do with this knowledge. Most people won't change. They'll feel the resonance of this message for a few hours, maybe a few days. Then they'll slip back into their old patterns. They'll ask questions again. They'll seek validation again. They'll perform again. Because the pull of habitual thinking is stronger than the pull of truth. And you'll be tempted to join them. The comfort of the familiar will whisper that you don't need to change this much, that you can just make small adjustments, that you can stay mostly the same and still get different results. But you know that's a lie now. Real transformation requires something most men never have. Commitment to being uncomfortable. Commitment to observing instead of asking, even when it feels wrong. Commitment to standing in your own power, even when every instinct tells you to seek approval. Commitment to becoming someone genuinely interesting instead of just learning better tricks. The men who change their lives are the ones who make a decision in this moment and stick to it. Not perfectly, not without stumbling, but with consistent intention. They decide that from now on they're going to observe more and ask less. They're going to trust their own judgment more and seek external validation less. They're going to build a real life with genuine depth instead of chasing surface-level achievements. This is your moment, not because I'm telling you it is, but because you feel it. You know something needs to change, you know the old way isn't working, and you know that the only person who can do the actual work is you. Machiavelli understood something that most modern men have forgotten. Real power is invisible. It doesn't announce itself, it doesn't need to. It simply exists in the quality of your presence, the clarity of your observations, the authenticity of your being. The man who's transformed this principle from theory into practice doesn't go around talking about observation and presence. He just lives it, and everyone around him feels the difference. You're at the threshold now. Behind you is everything you've been doing that hasn't worked. In front of you is a path that requires real courage. A path that asks you to become someone genuinely strong instead of performing strength. A path that demands you develop actual depth instead of collecting stories about depth. The choice is yours, but choose consciously. Because every moment you delay, every day you spend asking instead of observing, is a day you remain invisible. Stop interviewing the world. The world needs your presence, not your questions.